What happens when a routine flight turns into a battle of wills at 35,000 feet on a sold-out flight from Los Angeles to New York? One flight attendant decided she was the ultimate authority. She saw a black woman in casual clothes sitting in a premium seat and made a judgment. That judgment led to condescension, then a humiliating public accusation. The flight attendant thought she was putting a passenger in her place. What she didn't know was that she wasn't just insulting a passenger. She was interfering with a federal agent on a mission to save lives, and the karma that came for her wasn't just about losing her job. It was about to shatter her entire world. The air in the terminal at LAX was a familiar, chaotic symphony for Dr. Emily Carter. It was the frantic hum of rolling suitcases, the cacophony of final boarding calls, and the low murmur of 1,000 different life stories converging for a few hours in the sky. For Emily, it was just noise. Her focus was sharp-honed by years of training and a case that had consumed her for the last 6 months. She was dressed for anonymity and comfort on the 6-hour flight to JFK, a simple grey sweatsuit from a department store, expensive but unbranded, and a pair of well-worn sneakers. Her intricate box braids were pulled back into a neat, low ponytail. To the world, she was just another traveller. In her mind, she was a hunter. Her target was on this flight, not a person she would apprehend, but a piece of a puzzle. A courier unknowingly carrying a data drive embedded in a piece of luggage. This drive held the encrypted financial ledgers of a human trafficking ring operating between California and New York. Emily's job was simple: observe the handoff that was scheduled to happen upon landing at JFK, identify the recipient, and let her team on the ground take it from there. The stakes were impossibly high. The freedom of at least a dozen young women depended on that drive. Boarding for Oceanic Airlines. Flight 816 began, and Emily, holding a ticket for seat 3B in premium economy, joined the line. The seat wasn't a luxury, it was a necessity. It afforded her a clear view of the economy cabin entrance and the forward galley, the most likely places for a subtle exchange. As she stepped onto the aircraft, she was met by a flight attendant with a smile that was bright plastic and didn't quite reach her eyes. Her name tag read Karen Foster. She was a woman in her late 40s with meticulously coiffed blonde hair and a gaze that seemed to appraise every passenger in a fraction of a second. "Welcome aboard," Karen said, her voice a practiced, cheerful chime. Her eyes swept over Emily, taking in the sweatsuit and sneakers, and the cheerful chime lost a hint of its warmth. It was a micro-expression, a flicker of judgment, so fast that most would miss it. Emily did not. She found her aisle seat 3B. A man was already in the window seat, 3A Mark Jensen, a businessman in a crisp-tailored suit, already tapping away on his laptop. The middle seat 3C was empty. Emily stowed her small carry-on in the overhead bin and settled in her mind, already mapping the cabin, her senses on high alert. The boarding process continued. Karen Foster moved through the cabin with an air of proprietary command. She doted on the passengers in business class, laughing at a joke from a man in a Rolex, offering to hang his jacket with personal care. For Mark Jensen, next to Emily, she offered a pre-departure water with a warm, "Let me know if you need anything at all, Mr. Jensen." He nodded, barely looking up from his screen. When her eyes landed on Emily again, the warmth evaporated. Ma'am Karen said, her tone suddenly clipped and businesslike. "I'm going to need to see your boarding pass." Emily blinked slowly. Of course. She pulled out her phone and showed the digital pass. Karen squinted at the screen, holding the phone a little too close. "Seat 3B. Right." She handed it back without another word, her lips pursed into a thin line. She didn't ask Mark Jensen for his pass. She didn't ask the woman in the row behind them, just Emily. It was a small thing, a paper cut of an insult, but it set the tone. Emily ignored it, pulling out a novel. Reacting would serve no purpose. Her mission was everything. She tried to lose herself in the pages, but a part of her remained acutely aware of Karen Foster's presence, a discordant note in the otherwise routine environment of the flight. A few minutes later, as the last passengers were trickling in, a flustered couple appeared at their row. "Excuse me," the man said, looking at his ticket, and then at Emily. "I think you're in our seats. We have 3A and 3B. Emily calmly showed her pass again. "I'm in 3B. This gentleman is in 3A. Karen swooped in her expression, one of manufactured concern. "Is there a problem here?" "Yes," the man said, clearly annoyed. "Our seats seem to be taken." Karen looked at Emily, not the man in the suit. "Ma'am, these people are assigned to these seats. You may have misread your ticket." "I haven't." Emily stated her voice, even. "My pass is for 3B. Perhaps there's a duplication in your system." Karen's smile was now a tight, condescending line. "That's highly unlikely. Our systems are state-of-the-art." She turned to the couple. "Let me see your passes, please." The couple showed her their tickets. Karen's eyes widened for a split second before her professional mask slipped back into place. "Oh, my apologies. You're in row 30 seats, A and B." "Not 3. Common mistake." The couple, embarrassed, mumbled their apologies and trudged down the aisle toward the back of the plane. Karen watched them go, then turned her attention back to Emily. There was no apology. Instead, she said, "Well, that's sorted then," as if Emily had been the source of the confusion. She walked away, leaving a trail of chilly air in her wake. Mark Jensen, who had watched the entire exchange over the top of his laptop, gave Emily a brief, sympathetic glance before burying himself in his work again. Emily took a deep, centering breath. It was clear Karen Foster had made up her mind about her. The sweatsuit, the braids, the color of her skin, it all added up to a single erroneous conclusion in the flight attendant's mind: Emily didn't belong here. For now, she could let it go. She had bigger fish to fry. But as the cabin doors closed and the plane began its slow taxi to the runway, a small, persistent voice in the back of her mind told her this was far from over. The ascent was smooth, and the plane settled at its cruising altitude, a silver dart cutting through the endless blue. Below, the sprawling tapestry of the American landscape unfolded. Inside the cabin, a different kind of landscape was taking shape, one defined by social cues and unspoken hierarchies, all presided over by Karen Foster. The junior flight attendant, a young woman named Chloe Miller with wide, nervous eyes, began the drink service from the back of the cabin. Karen started from the front, a queen surveying her court. Her service was a study in contrasts. For the business class passengers, she was a concierge offering snacks with a flourish and conversation with a deferential laugh. For Mark Jensen, she leaned in conspiratorially. "Another sparkling water, Mr. Jensen. I can grab you some of the premium snacks from first class if you like. The nuts in this cabin are so pedestrian." Mark, engrossed in a spreadsheet, simply said, "Just a coffee. Black." "Thanks." When the cart reached Emily's row, Karen's demeanor shifted again. The smile vanished, replaced by a perfunctory, almost bored expression. "Something to drink?" she asked, not making eye contact, her focus on the rows behind. "Just a water, please," Emily said politely. Karen grabbed a plastic cup, slopped some ice into it from a scoop, and poured the water so quickly that it fizzed over the top and onto her hand. With a sound of irritation, she thrust the cup toward Emily. As Emily reached for it, Karen seemed to jolt with the slight hum of turbulence, and the cup tilted precariously. A cascade of ice-cold water splashed directly onto Emily's lap, soaking the grey fabric of her sweatsuit. "Oh," Karen exclaimed, her voice laced with theatrical, insincere surprise. "My goodness. So sorry about that." The turbulence had been a barely perceptible shudder, one that hadn't disturbed a single drop of Mark Jensen's freshly poured coffee. He looked up, his brow furrowed a silent witness to the blatant carelessness. Chloe, the junior attendant, now a few rows back, froze her eyes wide as she watched her senior colleague. Emily looked down at the dark, spreading stain on her pants, then back up at Karen. Her face was a mask of calm. Years at the FBI, staring down murderers and hardened criminals in interrogation rooms, had taught her to master her emotions. An emotional reaction was a loss of control, and control was everything. "It's all right," Emily said, her voice betraying no anger. "Do you have some napkins?" Karen, seemingly annoyed that she now had to perform the cleanup, grabbed a small stack of cocktail napkins, woefully inadequate for the spill, and handed them to Emily. "Here you go," she said, already starting to push the cart forward. That should dry out eventually. She didn't offer a blanket to cover the stain. She didn't offer to get a cloth or extra towels from the galley. The dismissal was as cold as the water soaking into Emily's skin. It was an act of aggression disguised as an accident, a power play meant to humiliate. Emily calmly blotted at her pants, the thin napkins quickly becoming uselessly saturated. She pressed the call button above her head. A few moments later, it was Chloe who answered, her expression deeply apologetic. "Yes, Mum. Can I help you?" she asked, her voice soft. "Yes. Could I please have a blanket, and perhaps a few more towels? I've had a bit of a spill," Emily said, her tone gentle, making it clear she held no animosity toward the younger woman. "Oh my gosh, of course," Chloe said, scurrying away. She returned moments later with a thick stack of paper towels and a sealed blanket from the overhead bin. "I am so sorry about that. Karen can be a little clumsy when we hit a bumpy patch." The way she said it with a quick, nervous glance towards the front of the cabin told Emily everything she needed to know. This was a pattern. "Thank you, Chloe. I appreciate it," Emily said, offering her a small, genuine smile. As she discreetly dried herself off under the blanket, Emily replayed the incident in her mind. It wasn't random. It was a calculated escalation. Karen was testing her pushing to see if she would break, if she would become the angry black woman that the flight attendant's prejudice was so clearly expecting. But Emily wouldn't give her the satisfaction. She returned to her book, though she wasn't reading. Her senses were heightened. She was tracking Karen's movements, the cadence of her voice, the way she interacted with other passengers. But most importantly, her focus remained on her primary objective. She scanned the economy cabin, her eyes subtly tracking the man in 17C, a nervous-looking student with a distinct bright yellow backpack. He was the courier. He was holding the key to the entire operation. He seemed oblivious to the drama unfolding in premium economy, which was a good thing. The last thing Emily needed was for her cover to be blown over a petty power trip. An hour later, Mark Jensen, finished with his work, decided to stretch his legs. He excused himself and walked toward the back of the plane. Karen, stationed in the forward galley, watched him go. Her eyes then flickered to Emily, who appeared to be asleep, her head resting against the headrest, the book open on her lap. A slow, malicious smile crept across Karen Foster's face. She saw an opportunity to put this woman who in her mind was so clearly out of her element, firmly in her place once and for all. She glanced at Chloe, who was busy organizing the service carts, and then took a deep breath, steeling herself. The final act was about to begin. The quiet hum of the aircraft was a fragile piece, easily shattered. Mark Jensen returned from his walk, pausing at his row, to let a passenger from the opposite aisle retrieve something from the overhead bin. He was distracted, pulling his phone from his pocket to check for a signal he knew wasn't there. When he finally sat down, he spent a minute tidying his space, plugging his laptop into the seat's power source, and arranging his papers. It was only then that he noticed. He patted his seat-back pocket. Then his jacket pocket. A frown creased his forehead. He stood up, checked the floor around his feet, his movements growing more frantic. "Is everything all right, Mr. Jensen?" The voice was Karen Foster's, dripping with concern. She had materialized instantly, as if she had been waiting for this exact moment. "No, actually," Mark said, frustrated. "I can't find my headphones. My Bose noise cancellers. I'm positive I left them in the seat pocket right here." Karen's eyes widened in feigned alarm. "Oh dear. Those are very expensive, aren't they? Are you sure you had them?" "Of course I'm sure," he snapped, his irritation growing. "I was using them before we took off. I put them in the pocket to charge my laptop." Karen placed a hand on his arm, a gesture of solidarity. Her gaze then slid with deliberate accusatory weight to the woman sleeping in seat 3B. Emily wasn't asleep. Through slitted eyelids, she had observed the entire performance. She felt a cold knot form in her stomach. She knew what was coming. "Well, Karen," said her voice, dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, loud enough for the surrounding rows to hear. "There aren't many places they could have gone. Are you sure you've checked all your bags?" "I've checked everything," Mark insisted, his voice rising in panic. "They're gone. Someone must have taken them while I was gone." Karen's expression hardened. She looked directly at Emily, who now opened her eyes and met her gaze. "Ma'am Karen," said her voice, sharp and loud, drawing the attention of everyone nearby. "I'm going to have to ask you to please stand up." Emily didn't move. She simply looked at Karen, her eyes calm and unblinking. "Why Mr. Jensen's property is missing," Karen announced to the cabin at large. "A very expensive set of headphones. They disappeared while he was away from his seat, and you were the only one here." The implication hung heavy and foul in the recycled air. Heads turned. Passengers started whispering. The woman in the row behind leaned forward, craning her neck to see. Emily felt the heat of a dozen pairs of eyes on her. The sweatsuit, the braids, the earlier confrontations. Karen had been building this case from the moment Emily had stepped on board. "Are you accusing me of stealing?" Emily asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "I'm not accusing anyone." Karen said, her voice slick with false piety. "I'm simply trying to help my passenger locate his missing property. Now, if you have nothing to hide, you won't mind if we take a look in your bag, will you?" Mark Jensen looked horrified. This had escalated far beyond what he'd intended. "Wait a minute," he said, looking from Karen to Emily. "I'm not saying she took them. I just said they're missing." But Karen was on a roll. She saw this as her moment of vindication. "Airline policy requires me to investigate any claims of theft on my aircraft. It's a matter of security." She crossed her arms, standing over Emily like a warden. "Now are you going to cooperate, or am I going to have to get the captain involved?" The threat was clear. "Make a scene and you'll be branded a thief and a disruptive passenger." Emily slowly, deliberately placed her book on the empty middle seat. She looked at Mark Jensen. "So when was the last time you saw your headphones?" He stammered, caught off guard. Before I got up, I think. I put them in the seat pocket." "And you've checked your laptop bag?" Emily asked. "Sometimes when we're in a hurry, we put things in a different pocket than we remember." "Of course I've checked my bag," he said, though a flicker of doubt now crossed his face. Karen stepped forward, intervening. "She's just trying to distract you, Mr. Jensen. It's a classic diversionary tactic." She turned back to Emily, her voice dripping with venomous sweetness. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way. It's your choice, Ma'am." Emily held her gaze for a long moment. She could see the triumph in Karen's eyes, the smug satisfaction of a bully who thinks she's finally won. She saw the nervous glances from other passengers, the mix of pity and suspicion on their faces. She thought of the courier in 17C and the vital importance of not drawing any undue attention to herself. But this was a line that could not be uncrossed. This was a public, professional, and deeply personal attack. Her mission was paramount, but her dignity and the principle of the matter was not something she could sacrifice. "You're right," Emily said, her voice now as cold and hard as steel. "We should do this the hard way." She pressed the call button again. "And you're right about something else, too. You absolutely should get the captain." The smile finally slipped from Karen Foster's face, replaced by a flash of uncertainty. This wasn't the reaction she had expected. She had anticipated tears or angry denials or a reluctant, humiliating submission. This cold, unwavering confidence was something else, entirely. It was unnerving. "Fine," Karen snapped, regaining her composure. "You've brought this on yourself." She turned on her heel and marched determinedly toward the cockpit, her back ramrod straight. The cabin was silent, save for the hum of the engines. Mark Jensen looked miserable. Chloe, the junior attendant, stood frozen near the galley, her face pale with shock and fear. Emily Carter sat perfectly still, her hands resting in her lap. The storm had broken. Now the lightning was about to strike. The walk from the cockpit door to row 3 felt like the longest in Captain Evans's 20-year career. Karen Foster had burst onto the flight deck, breathless and indignant, painting a picture of a disruptive, uncooperative passenger, a possible thief who was now demanding to see him. Captain Evans was a man who operated by the book. He was methodical, calm, and disliked in-flight drama intensely. He arrived at the scene, a tall, authoritative figure in a crisp pilot's uniform. The tension in the cabin was palpable. He saw Karen, her arms crossed, looking smug. He saw Mark Jensen, looking like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. And he saw a black woman in a grey sweatsuit, sitting calmly by the aisle, watching him with an unnervingly steady gaze. "What seems to be the problem here?" Captain Evans asked, his voice a low baritone that commanded attention. Karen immediately launched into her rehearsed speech. "Captain, I'm so glad you're here. This passenger in seat 3B is being accused of stealing a pair of expensive headphones from Mr. Jensen in 3A. She refuses to cooperate with a simple search of her bag and has been very hostile. For the safety and security of this flight, I felt it was necessary to involve you." The captain listened, his expression unreadable. He then turned to Emily. "Ma'am, is this true? Are you refusing to cooperate?" Emily finally stood up. She wasn't tall, but she had a presence that seemed to fill the space around her. She didn't look at Karen. She looked directly at Captain Evans. "Captain," she began, her voice clear and carrying, "my name is Dr. Emily Carter. What your flight attendant, Ms. Foster, has told you is a gross misrepresentation of the facts." She continued, laying out the events with precision. "Mr. Jensen's headphones are missing. Ms. Foster did not ask to search my bag. She demanded it. She did not suggest I was a suspect. She announced it to the entire cabin. She has done this after a series of escalating microaggressions that began the moment I stepped onto your aircraft." Karen scoffed. "Microaggressions? Oh, please. I treated you like any other passenger. This is ridiculous. She's making this about race to deflect from the fact that she's a thief." "That's enough, Karen," the captain said sternly, holding up a hand. He turned back to Emily, his face serious. "Dr. Carter, while I understand your frustration, this is a difficult situation. A passenger's property is missing. Can you please just confirm for me that you did not take the headphones? I can do better than that," Captain Emily replied. She reached into the front pocket of her sweatshirt. For a heart-stopping second, Karen's eyes gleamed with triumph, as if she expected Emily to pull out the missing headphones. Instead, Emily produced a slim black leather wallet. She flipped it open. Inside, nestled in a custom-cut recess, was a gleaming golden badge. Above it, an identification card with her photograph and name, Dr. Emily Carter, Special Agent, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Special Agent Carter, FBI. She stated, her voice resonating with an authority that dwarfed everyone else's in the aisle. "I am on this flight on official, time-sensitive federal business. Your flight attendant has not only subjected me to a biased and humiliating public spectacle based on nothing more than my appearance, but she is now actively interfering with a federal investigation." The silence that followed was absolute. It was as if the air had been sucked out of the cabin. Mark Jensen's jaw was literally hanging open. Other passengers gasped. Chloe, the junior attendant, looked like she was about to faint. But the most dramatic reaction came from Karen Foster. The color drained from her face, leaving a pasty gray mask of pure shock. Her smugness dissolved into utter disbelief, which then morphed into a raw, primal fear. Her eyes darted from the badge to Emily's face and back again. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Captain Evans stared at the badge, his professional composure cracking for the first time. He swallowed hard. "Special Agent, I had no idea. I sincerely apologize." "Your apology is noted," Captain Emily said, her tone softening slightly. "But we still have the matter of Ms. Foster's conduct and Mr. Jensen's missing headphones." She then turned her attention to the flustered businessman. "Mr. Jensen, I'm going to ask you one more time. Please open your laptop bag, unzip the frontmost pocket, the one you probably never use, and feel all the way at the bottom." Looking dazed, Mark Jensen knelt and did as he was told. He fumbled with the zipper, his hands shaking slightly. He plunged his hand into the pocket, and his eyes went wide. Slowly he pulled out his Bose noise-cancelling headphones. "Oh my God," he whispered, holding them up for everyone to see. "They were in here the whole time. I am so sorry. I was so sure." The last shred of Karen Foster's justification vanished into thin air. She stood exposed, her prejudice laid bare for all to see. The accusation wasn't just wrong, it was preposterous. She had built a fantasy of criminality around a decorated federal agent. Emily looked at Karen, whose face was now a crumpled mess of humiliation and terror. "You see, Ms. Foster," Emily said, her voice low, but carrying a chilling finality. "Bias is a funny thing. It makes you see what you want to see, not what's actually there. You didn't see a passenger in premium economy. You saw a black woman in a sweatsuit who you decided didn't belong. You were so busy trying to prove yourself right that you never once stopped to consider that you might be wrong." She then turned back to the captain. "Captain Evans, your flight attendant, is now a liability. For the remainder of this flight, I want her nowhere near me or my belongings. I will require a full written report from you, as well as signed statements from Mr. Jensen and any other passengers who witnessed the events. I will be filing a formal complaint with Oceanic Airlines and a civil rights violation report with the Department of Justice upon landing." "Is that understood?" Captain Evans, looking pale, nodded curtly. "Understood, Special Agent Carter. Absolutely." "Karen," he said, his voice now like ice. "Go to the rear galley. Stay there. Do not speak to another passenger for the rest of this flight. We will discuss your future employment when we are on the ground." Defeated and trembling, Karen Foster turned and without a word made the long, shameful walk to the back of the plane, under the silent, judging stares of every single passenger. The Queen had been dethroned, and her kingdom had just come crashing down around her. The rest of the flight to JFK was an exercise in strained professionalism. Captain Evans was profusely apologetic, personally serving Emily her meals and drinks, and checking on her every 30 minutes. Mark Jensen couldn't apologize enough, stammering his regrets and offering to do anything he could to make it right. "Just write down exactly what happened, Mr. Jensen." Emily told him, her voice professional, but not unkind. "That's the most helpful thing you can do." She accepted a written statement from him, and from the woman in the row behind, both of whom detailed Karen's escalating hostility and the final baseless accusation. Chloe, the junior flight attendant, approached Emily with tears in her eyes. Special Agent Carter. "I am so sorry," she whispered, wringing her hands. "I saw what she was doing. I knew it was wrong. I should have said something, but I was scared of her. Fear can make people do things they regret." Chloe Emily said, her gaze softening. "But courage is doing the right thing. Even when you're scared, you can still do that. Write down what you saw. Be honest. That's all anyone can ask." Chloe nodded, a look of resolve hardening her features. "I will." While the cabin drama had subsided, Emily's mind was racing. The commotion had been a significant unplanned variable. She subtly scanned the cabin again, her eyes landing on the courier in 17C. The young man with the yellow backpack looked pale and sweaty. The confrontation, the appearance of the captain, the word security, it had clearly rattled him. He was now drawing the one thing a courier should never draw attention. He kept shifting in his seat, glancing nervously toward the front of the plane. This was bad. A spooked courier could bolt. He could ditch the package. He could compromise the entire operation. Emily discreetly pulled out her encrypted satellite phone, shielding it from view. Under the cover of her blanket, she typed a quick coded message to her partner on the ground at JFK Agent David Hayes. "Asset is agitated. Incident in cabin. Maybe a flight risk on arrival. Elevate surveillance at designated gate." The reply came back almost instantly. "Acknowledged. Ground team is repositioning. We'll be ready for anything." "You good," Emily typed back. "I'm fine, just dealing with some local turbulence." She put the phone away, her focus entirely back on the mission. Karen Foster's petty prejudice had done more than just humiliate her. It had potentially jeopardized a multi-million-dollar federal investigation and the lives of trafficking victims. The anger she had suppressed for hours began to simmer cold and hard in her chest. This was no longer just about a civil rights complaint. This was about consequences. Upon landing at JFK, the "Fasten Seatbelt" sign had barely pinged off when Captain Evans's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived at the gate. However, we ask that you please remain in your seats until authorized ground personnel have boarded the aircraft. Thank you for your cooperation." A murmur of confusion went through the cabin. This was not a standard procedure. Emily watched as two Port Authority police officers and two plainclothes individuals she recognized as her FBI colleagues, including David Hayes, boarded the plane. They spoke quietly with Captain Evans at the cockpit door. Meanwhile, in 17C, the courier was panicking. He saw the uniforms and his face went ashen. He grabbed his yellow backpack and made a foolish, desperate move. He bolted from his seat, trying to push past other passengers toward the rear exit of the plane, hoping to get lost in the deplaning crowd. But Emily was ready. As he scrambled past her row, she moved with fluid, startling speed. She didn't stand up. She simply stuck out her leg. The courier, not expecting the obstacle, went tumbling, sprawling into the aisle with a loud crash. The yellow backpack flew from his grasp, sliding several feet across the floor. Before anyone could even react, David Hayes and the other agent were on him, securing him with swift, practiced efficiency. "FBI, stay where you are." The cabin erupted in shocked gasps. Passengers who had just witnessed the drama with the flight attendant were now seeing a full-blown FBI arrest in the aisle. From the back of the plane, confined to the rear galley, Karen Foster watched the entire scene unfold. She saw the FBI agents, the police, the suspect on the floor, and she saw the woman she had accused of stealing a pair of headphones at the very center of it, all calm and in command, directing the agents with a simple nod. The realization hit her like a physical blow. This wasn't just some random flight. This woman wasn't just a federal agent flying commercially. This was an active operation. The commotion she had caused, the public scene she had made it, had all happened in the middle of a delicate, high-stakes FBI mission. Her attempt to wield her minuscule power had blundered into a world of genuine life-and-death authority. The sick feeling in her stomach intensified, twisting into a knot of pure dread. Her career was over. She knew that. But as she watched the agents lead the terrified courier away, she had the chilling premonition that her problems were only just beginning. The debriefing at the FBI's New York field office was a mixture of relief and frustration. The data drive was secured from the courier's backpack. It was a massive win, a key that would unlock the financial infrastructure of the entire trafficking network. "Your little stunt with the trip up was classic," Emily David Hayes said, pouring her a cup of lukewarm coffee. "Textbook." But the kid was spooked. If he'd managed to get into the terminal, he might have dumped the drive. What the hell happened up there? Emily recounted the entire saga with Karen Foster, from the boarding pass, check to the spilled water, to the grand finale of the theft accusation. As she spoke, the agents in the room went from amused to aghast. "Are you kidding me?" one agent muttered. "All that over a seat in premium economy." "It wasn't about the seat," Emily said, her voice weary. "It never is. It was about who she thought I was. And her little power trip almost cost us this entire case. We'll handle it," the Division Chief Assistant Special Agent in Charge, Michael Donovan, assured her. "I've already spoken to Oceanic Airlines Corporate Security. They are beyond mortified. They're flying their head of HR and their chief legal counsel out here to meet with you personally tomorrow." Karen Foster was suspended without pay the second the wheels touched the ground. But for Emily, that wasn't enough. It felt too simple, too corporate. It was damage control, not justice. "I want to press charges for interference with a federal agent," Emily stated firmly. Her actions directly caused a subject to panic, creating a dangerous and unpredictable variable in a secured operation. Donovan sighed. "We can and we will if you want to. It'll be a mountain of paperwork, but it's doable. First, let's see what the drive gives us. Let the tech guys work their magic." The magic happened faster than anyone expected. The encryption was tough, but the FBI's cyber division was tougher. Within hours, they had cracked the first layer of the ledgers. It was a treasure trove of names, bank accounts, shell corporations, and transaction logs. It was the network's entire nervous system laid bare. As they began cross-referencing names and accounts with existing databases, a junior analyst flagged something unusual. "Hey, Agent Carter, can you look at this?" He pointed to a series of recurring small-time money transfers. The sums were not huge, just a few $1,000s here and there, channeled from a primary slush fund account into dozens of smaller individual bank accounts across the country. It was a classic money laundering technique, smurfing designed to break up large illicit sums into amounts too small to trigger automatic bank reporting. "Standard smurfing," Emily observed. "What's the flag?" "The name on one of the receiving accounts," the analyst said, tapping his screen. "The transfers are consistent every month for the last 2 years. The name is William Foster." The name hit Emily with a jolt. Foster. Any connection to a Karen Foster? A few keystrokes and a quick search of public records later, the answer lay on the screen before them. William Billy Foster of Queens, New York, was Karen Foster's younger brother. The room went silent. David Hayes let out a long, low whistle. "No way," he breathed. "You can't make this stuff up." The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Karen Foster, the self-righteous flight attendant who judged Emily based on the color of her skin and the clothes she wore, was sending her brother money. And the money she was so proud to send, the money that likely paid his rent or his car payments, was coming directly from the profits of human trafficking. Her brother was a low-level cog in the very machine that Emily was trying to dismantle. This was the twist no one saw coming. This was karma in its purest, most devastating form. Emily's personal humiliation on the flight was now inextricably linked to the monstrous criminality of her case. Karen Foster hadn't just interfered with an investigation. She was unknowingly a beneficiary of its proceeds. Her prejudice, her arrogance, her need to feel superior had caused her to attack the one person on Earth who was in the process of uncovering the sordid truth that implicated her own family. "Get a warrant," Emily said, her voice devoid of all emotion, "for William Foster's financials, and put a surveillance team on him. Now." The case had just become deeply, horribly personal. For Karen Foster, the days following Flight 816 were a slow, agonizing descent into a personal hell crafted from the bricks of her own arrogance. The first official blow came not as a dramatic confrontation, but with the cold, sterile efficiency of corporate procedure. She was summoned to a mandatory video conference with 3 people who represented the pillars of her former life: Martin Holloway, Oceanic Airlines, stoic Vice President of Human Resources; a sharp-eyed corporate lawyer named Jessica Cole; and to her surprise and irritation, Captain Evans. Karen logged into the call from her meticulously clean apartment, dressed in a crisp blouse, ready for battle. She had spent 2 sleepless nights rehearsing her narrative. She was the victim of a manipulative, aggressive passenger who had played the system, a system now rigged against hard-working employees like herself. "Thank you for joining us," Karen Martin Holloway began, his voice devoid of warmth. "We are here to discuss the findings of our internal investigation into the events of Flight 816. Karen immediately launched her preemptive strike. "I'm glad, because my reputation has been dragged through the mud. That woman was a professional agitator. She twisted everything right from the moment she boarded. I have 22 years of exemplary service with this airline. 22 years. Are you going to throw all that away based on the word of one disgruntled passenger in a tracksuit?" The lawyer Jessica Cole spoke next, her tone as sharp as a shard of glass. "Ms. Foster, we have more than just one passenger's word. We have a signed, notarized statement from Mark Jensen in seat 3A detailing your unprofessional and targeted behavior. We have a statement from passenger Sarah Macmillan in 4D, who described your actions as a shocking and overtly racist public shaming. And most significantly, she paused, letting the weight settle. We have a 4-page, detailed report from flight attendant Chloe Miller." Karen's breath caught in her throat. "Chloe," her timid, mousy subordinate. Chloe's statement, Holloway continued, picking up a paper out of view, describes how you instructed her not to offer Ms. Carter a pre-departure beverage, how she witnessed you intentionally spill water on Ms. Carter, and how she overheard you in the galley refer to Ms. Carter as that freeloader in 3B who must have scammed a fake upgrade. Does that sound familiar? The blood drained from Karen's face. She had been so certain of Chloe's loyalty, or at least her silence born of fear. The betrayal felt more personal than the passenger complaints. "She's lying." Karen stammered the words, tasting like ash. "She's a junior attendant. She's intimidated. That agent probably threatened her Captain Evans silent, until now finally spoke his voice, laced with a deep, weary disappointment. Karen, I was there. I saw the badge and I saw the look on your face. I saw the headphones in Mr. Jensen's bag. The investigation is a formality. Your employment with Oceanic Airlines is terminated effective immediately. Your flight benefits are revoked permanently. A box will be sent to your address for the return of all company property, including your uniforms." The finality of his words was absolute. It was an execution. Her world built on wings and seniority crumbled into dust. She screamed, she cried, she threatened lawsuits, but the faces on the screen remained impassive. Finally, they ended the call, leaving her staring at her own reflection in the blank monitor, a frantic, defeated woman in a neat, meaningless blouse. In the week that followed, she became a ghost in her own life. The shame was a physical weight pinning her to her sofa. She obsessively scrolled through aviation forums, her stomach churning as she read anonymous posts from other flight attendants discussing the LAX JFK FBI incident. The story was already a legend, a cautionary tale. She was a caricature of a Karen, a meme in the making. When she tried calling old colleagues, the friends she used to share layover dinners with, her calls went to voicemail or were met with clipped, uncomfortable excuses. She had been surgically excised from the world she once ruled. The only person she spoke to was her younger brother Billy. He was the one bright spot, the one person she had always felt superior to, and therefore safe with. She had helped him out for years, sending him money to supplement the poker winnings he was always bragging about. That money, her ability to provide it, was a source of pride. It proved her success, her stability. That illusion was shattered by a frantic phone call on a rainy Tuesday morning. It was Billy, his voice, a high-pitched shriek of terror. "They were here, Karen. The damn FBI, they kicked in my door at 6 a.m, he yelled, his words tumbling over each other. "They had a warrant. They tore my place apart. They took everything, my laptop, my phone, all my bank records. They kept asking about the money, Karen. Where did the money come from?" Karen's heart hammered against her ribs. "What money? Billy? What did you tell them?" "The poker. Right? You tell them. It's from the poker." "I tried," he sobbed, his bravado, gone replaced by the pathetic whimper of a scared child. They weren't buying it. They had charts and bank names. They knew about the deposits, the withdrawals, all of it. They said something about laundering. "Karen, what am I going to do?" They told me I needed a lawyer. A real lawyer. A cold dread, heavier and more terrifying than the loss of her job, began to creep up her spine. His story had always seemed a little too good to be true, his winnings too consistent. But she had needed to believe it, to see him as a lucky rogue, rather than the failure she secretly feared he was. Now the FBI was at his door, the same FBI that Agent Carter belonged to. It couldn't be a coincidence. It was impossible. Her own summons arrived 2 days later, a formal, intimidating letter requesting her presence at the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. Her new, very expensive lawyer advised her it was likely a follow-up to the airline incident, a formality related to the interference complaint. "Just stick to the story," the lawyer advised. "You felt threatened, you were following protocol. We'll paint you as the victim." On the day of the meeting, Karen dressed with the precision of a soldier preparing for inspection. She wore a severe black pantsuit, her hair pulled back in a tight, merciless bun. She was projecting responsibility, professionalism. Everything she felt had been stolen from her. As she walked through the imposing marble lobby of the federal building, she felt a flicker of her old confidence. She was Karen Foster. She had handled unruly passengers and medical emergencies at 35,000 feet. She could handle this. The conference room was cold and quiet. 2 prosecutors, a man and a woman, sat at one side of a long, polished table. Her lawyer sat beside her, shuffling papers. The door opened, and Karen braced herself. But the person who entered was not another lawyer. It was Special Agent Emily Carter. Emily was no longer the anonymous traveler in a sweatsuit. She was a vision of power dressed in a charcoal grey suit that fit her perfectly. Her presence filled the room, radiating a calm, absolute authority that made Karen's own constructed confidence feel like a cheap costume. Emily didn't look at her. She took a seat next to the prosecutors, opened a file, and waited. The lead prosecutor, a man named Henderson, began. "Ms. Foster, thank you for coming in. We've asked you here to discuss the events of Oceanic Flight 816, specifically your interference with a federal officer in the performance of her duties." Her lawyer immediately jumped in, but Henderson held up a hand. "However, that's a secondary matter today. The primary reason you are here concerns a far more serious investigation." He gestured to a large screen on the wall which flickered to life. It showed the logo of the FBI and the words, "Operation Broken Wing." For the past 18 months, Henderson said, his voice dropping, "The FBI has been investigating a sophisticated human trafficking ring operating across North America. This organization is responsible for the exploitation of dozens of young women, some of them minors." He clicked a remote. A series of photographs appeared on the screen, blurred, anonymized faces of girls who looked lost and terrified. Karen flinched. What did this have to do with her? This organization was funded by a complex money laundering network. Henderson continued the screen, now showing intricate flow charts of bank accounts and shell corporations. "We move money from illicit activities, break it into smaller, untraceable amounts, and feed it back into the legitimate economy. For months we were trying to get a complete picture of this financial structure." He paused and looked directly at Karen. "Your actions on Flight 816 were instrumental in helping us do that." Karen stared, confused. Was this a trick Agent Carter was on that flight to observe a courier carrying the final piece of that puzzle, the complete financial ledgers? Your public, baseless, and frankly bigoted confrontation with her nearly compromised the entire operation. But it also had an unintended side effect. It forced our hand. It led us to accelerate the decryption of the data we already had. And in that data, we found a recurring name. He clicked the remote again. A single line of a spreadsheet was magnified on the screen. It was a transfer log, and the name in the recipient column was William Foster. Karen made a sound, a choked gasp. It couldn't be. "No," she whispered. That's a mistake. My brother wins at poker." The female prosecutor spoke for the first time, her voice sharp and devoid of pity. "Your brother isn't a poker player, Ms. Foster. He's a smurf, a low-level functionary who allows criminals to use his bank account to wash their money. For a 2% cut, he has been helping to finance an organization that puts women in chains." She slid a file across the table. "He was arrested yesterday morning. He has already given a full confession." Karen's mind fractured. The room began to spin. "Billy, human trafficking. It was a nightmare." She looked at her lawyer, who sat stunned and silent. She looked at the prosecutors, their faces grim. Finally, her desperate, horrified gaze landed on Emily Carter. Emily met her eyes for the first time. There was no triumph in her expression, no satisfaction. There was only a profound, weary stillness. Tears streamed down Karen's face, hot and furious. All her fear, her shame, her confusion coalesced into a single point, of pure, unadulterated hatred. "You," she hissed her voice, a ragged sob. "You did this to him. You did this to my family." Emily leaned forward slightly, her voice low and precise, cutting through Karen's hysteria. "No, Miss Foster. You did. You got on that plane and saw a black woman who you decided was less than you. You harassed her, you tried to humiliate her, and you publicly accused her of being a thief. You were so consumed by your own petty prejudice, so desperate to prove your own superiority, that you never once thought to question the foundation your life was built on. You never questioned where your brother, who has never held a steady job in his life, was getting the money for his new car, or the cash he so generously gifted you for your birthday." She let that sink in. The final, devastating blow. The money she had accepted, the money that made her feel successful and benevolent, was tainted with the suffering of others. Your hatred, Emily, finished her voice, as cold and clear as a winter morning, created a massive disturbance. That disturbance forced us to act, to dig faster and harder. Your singular focus on me put a spotlight on the entire operation, and when we turned that spotlight on, it led us straight to your brother's door. You didn't just interfere with my investigation, Ms. Foster. You finished it for me. The truth of it, the sheer, crushing, karmic weight of it, broke Karen Foster completely. She wasn't a victim. She wasn't a misunderstood professional. She was the architect of her own ruin and the ruin of her family. Her blind, ugly prejudice had been a beacon that guided justice to the one place she never thought to look, her own back door. She slumped in her chair, the fight gone, replaced by a hollow, echoing emptiness. Outside the window, the city of New York bustled on, indifferent. Her world had ended, not with a bang, but with a quiet, devastating click of a prosecutor's remote control. In the end, this wasn't just a story about a flight attendant getting fired. It was a chilling, real-life demonstration of how the poison of prejudice can infect and destroy everything it touches. Karen Foster's single act of baseless discrimination didn't just cause a scene on an airplane. It set off a karmic chain reaction that unraveled her entire world, exposing a darkness she was unknowingly connected to all along. Dr. Emily Carter wasn't looking for a fight that day. She was trying to save lives. But when confronted with ugly personal injustice, she showed that the most powerful response isn't anger, but a quiet, unshakable resolve. This story is a stark reminder that our actions, big and small, have ripples. Respect costs nothing, but a lack of it can cost you everything. If you believe that justice, in its own strange and twisting way, was served, please hit that like button. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more true stories of drama justice and unforgettable real-life karma. Thank you for listening.